There is a secret sitting inside the Torah, a financial law so precise, so powerful, that for centuries the rabbis who understood it kept it strictly within the walls of the yeshiva. Not because it was too complex for ordinary people to understand, not because it required years of study before it could be grasped, but because the sages who carried this knowledge understood something deep about human nature. They understood that when a secret this powerful reaches someone who is not ready to receive it, it gets dismissed, misunderstood, laughed at, wasted. And this secret was too important to waste. Today I am giving it to you. Not to everyone watching this video, to you, because you chose to click. And that tells me something important about where you are right now. My name is Rabbi Eliyahu, and for over 40 years I have studied the ancient laws of the Torah, the Talmud, and the hidden teachings of the Kabbalah. I have sat across from wealthy Jewish families on 3 continents. I have watched how generational wealth is built, protected, and passed down through bloodlines that survived wars, persecution, and economic collapses that destroyed entire nations around them. In all of those decades, in all of those kitchens and study halls and quiet conversations at the end of Shabbat, I encountered one single principle that appeared in every family, every generation, without exception. A principle so simple that when I first heard it, I almost walked away from it. A principle that most financial advisors have never read, that most rabbis have never taught publicly, and that Jewish families have whispered to their children for 3,000 years. Stay with me until the end of this video, because by the time I finish, the way you think about money will never be the same again. Let me tell you about the moment I first encountered this secret. I was 31 years old. I had been studying for years. I understood Torah. I understood the laws. I observed Shabbat faithfully. I gave tzedakah regularly. I prayed with intention, but my own financial life felt like I was walking through fog. I was working hard. I was doing everything I had been taught, and yet something always felt blocked, like there was a ceiling above me that I could not see but could not break through either. I had the effort. I had the faith. But the abundance was not matching either of them. I went to my teacher, Rabbi Avraham Weiss of blessed memory, one of the last great Talmudic scholars who had studied directly under the sages of pre-war Europe. He was in his 80s at the time. His family had lost everything in the Holocaust. Their home, their community, their entire world erased in a few years. And yet, within one generation, his family had rebuilt completely. Not partially, completely. I had always wanted to ask him how. That afternoon, I finally did. I sat across from him and I asked him directly. I said, Rabbi, I study, I observe, I give tzedakah faithfully. Why does the wealth not flow? He looked at me for a long moment before answering. The room was quiet, and then he said something I have repeated to thousands of people in the 4 decades since. He said, Eliyahu, you are trying to receive abundance with a closed hand. I did not fully understand him that day. I thanked him and I left. But those words stayed with me for months. I turned them over and over in my mind. A closed hand. What did he mean? I was not greedy. I was not withholding. I gave regularly. How was my hand closed? The answer came 6 months later when I went deep into a section of Deuteronomy that I had read dozens of times before, but never truly heard. And that is the difference between reading Torah and learning Torah. You can read the same passage 100 times, and on the 101st reading it opens. The secret is this. In the book of Deuteronomy, in Hebrew Devarim, there is a law that almost no one discusses outside of traditional Jewish learning circles. It is called the law of Shemitah, the sabbatical year. Every 7 years, the Torah commands the Jewish people to do something that sounds to the modern ear like financial suicide. Release all debts. Cancel what is owed to you. Open the hand completely. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. Every 7 years, debts between Jewish people were canceled entirely. Whatever someone owed you at the end of the 7th year, it was gone, released, finished. Now I want you to sit with something uncomfortable for a moment. Because when most people hear this, their first reaction is fear. What about what I am owed? What about the money people borrowed from me? What happens to my wealth if I simply release it? And that reaction, that tightening in the chest, that instinct to protect and hold and grip, is exactly what the Torah was designed to address. Because the Talmud in Tractate Gittin records the words of Hillel the Elder, one of the greatest sages in all of Jewish history, who observed something devastating happening in his generation. He observed that as the Shemitah year approached, wealthy people stopped lending to the poor. They held their money back. They tightened their hand because they were afraid of losing what they released. And so the poor, who needed loans most desperately before the sabbatical year, could not get them. The wealthy were protecting themselves. And in protecting themselves, they were closing the channels through which abundance flows. Hillel understood that this fear, this closed-hand relationship with money, was not protecting wealth. It was suffocating it. So he created a legal mechanism called the Prusbul, a document that allowed debts to be transferred to a rabbinic court before the Shemitah year, so that lending could continue, so that the hand of the wealthy could stay open, so that the channels could remain clear. But here is what almost everyone misses entirely about this story. The Prusbul was not created to avoid generosity. It was not a loophole. It was not a way to escape the spirit of Shemitah. It was created to protect the psychology of generosity, to keep the channels of giving open so that wealth could keep flowing through the community. This is the secret that Rabbi Weiss was pointing me toward when he told me I was trying to receive abundance with a closed hand. The biblical finance principle that Jewish families have passed down for 3,000 years is not a strategy. It is not a formula. It is not a financial instrument or an investment vehicle or a savings method. It is a posture, a fundamental orientation toward money, an open hand, not reckless giving, not financial irresponsibility, not throwing your money away without wisdom, a deliberate, disciplined, daily practice of keeping the hand open, releasing what is finished, giving what is required, trusting that what flows out will flow back multiplied. Because the Torah does not promise that the open hand loses. The Torah promises that the open hand receives. Now I want to show you something, because I have learned over 4 decades that people hear ancient wisdom and they respect it. They nod. They find it beautiful. but they do not always believe it in their bones until they see the modern confirmation. And I have always found that the most powerful moment in teaching is not when ancient wisdom surprises people. It is when modern science confirms what the Torah already knew. In 2010, researchers at Harvard Business School published a study on what they called prosocial spending. They gave participants money and divided them into two groups. One group was told to spend the money on themselves. The other group was told to give it away entirely. Every measurable indicator of well-being, happiness, life satisfaction, sense of financial security was significantly higher in the group that gave. But the finding that stopped me completely when I read it was this one. The people who gave did not feel poorer. They felt wealthier. Their own subjective perception of their financial security increased, even though they had less money in their hand than when they started. The Talmud described this exact phenomenon 2,000 years before Harvard. In Tractate Tanit, the sages recorded this teaching. They said the world is sustained by three things: truth, justice, and peace. And then in the context of wealth, they added something that the commentators debated for centuries. They said abundance is sustained by the open hand, not because giving is noble, not because generosity earns reward in some distant spiritual accounting, but because the psychology of the open hand creates the inner condition from which wealth grows. A person with a closed hand is always counting what might be lost. They move through the world in a posture of scarcity, every decision filtered through the fear of losing, every opportunity measured against the risk of releasing. And you cannot build wealth while your eyes are pointed at loss. You cannot receive with a fist. It is not physically possible. The same hand that grips too tightly cannot open wide enough to receive what is coming toward it. A person with an open hand moves through the world differently. They see what might arrive, not only what might leave. They make decisions from abundance rather than from fear. And that posture, that inner orientation, changes what they notice, what they attract, what they build, and what lasts. This is not mysticism. This is practical psychology encoded in the Torah 3,000 years before the language of psychology existed. Here is how to apply this principle beginning this week. Not someday. Not when your financial situation improves. This week, because the open hand is not a reward for having enough. It is the practice that creates enough. Step one. Identify one place in your financial life right now where your hand is closed out of fear, not out of wisdom, not out of careful planning, out of fear. A debt someone owes you that you are holding onto with quiet resentments. A contribution you have been withholding because you are not sure you can afford it. An opportunity to support someone that you walked past because you were in protection mode. Find it. Name it. Write it down on paper. Because the moment you name the closed hand, you begin to loosen it. Step two. Make one deliberate act of financial release this week. Not an amount that damages you, not something reckless. An amount that requires trust. An amount that your closed hand does not want to let go of, but that wisdom tells you is right. Release it consciously and with full intention. And as you release it, say these words out loud. The same words that Jewish families have said at the moment of giving for generations. Ze leze, This is for this, meaning what I release now creates the space for what I need to receive. The hand that releases is the hand that receives. Say those words. Mean them. Step 3. For the next 30 days, every single morning before you look at your finances, before you check your account, before you open any financial application, hold your hands open in front of you, palms facing upward, and say this aloud. Today I receive with an open hand. I give with an open hand. Abundance flows toward me because I do not block its path. Say it every morning for 30 days. This is not magic. It is not a ritual without meaning. It is a daily, intentional reprogramming of your most fundamental posture toward money. It is the practice of choosing every single morning before the world asks you to be afraid, to face the day with an open hand. Rabbi Weiss lived to 94. A few months before he passed, I visited him for the last time. We sat together in his study, the same room where he had taught me decades earlier, and I told him, Rabbi, I finally understand what you meant. The closed hand, the open hand, I finally understand. He nodded slowly. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said one more thing, and I believe he said it knowing I would carry it forward. He said, Eliyahu, the closed hand is never really protecting anything, because the wealth you grip so tightly was never in your hand to begin with. It was passing through you, like water passes through a channel, and the only question that has ever mattered is whether your channel was clean enough and open enough and trusting enough to carry it forward to the next person, the next generation, the next blessing. Open the channel and watch what flows. You did not find this video by accident. Something in you was already ready to hear this before I said a single word. The question is not whether this teaching is true. The question is whether you are willing to live it. Not just understand it, live it. Open the hand. This week, starting today, if this teaching has moved something inside you, subscribe to this channel now and turn on notifications. Every single week, I reveal ancient Jewish wisdom on money, prosperity, and the hidden spiritual laws that govern how wealth moves through the world and through generations. Teachings that were kept within the walls of the yeshiva for centuries. Teachings that Jewish families have whispered to their children across 3,000 years of history. And teachings that you now carry with you. Leave a comment below right now and write the words, "My hand is open," not as a comment, as a declaration. Because the moment you say it and mean it, something inside you begins to shift. I have seen it happen thousands of times. Write those words, "My hand is open." Share this video with one person in your life who is working hard and cannot understand why abundance keeps slipping away from them. One video, one teaching, one shift in posture. It may be the most valuable thing you ever send them. I will close with a blessing. May your hand always be open enough to give freely and receive fully. May every channel of abundance in your life be clear and flowing and completely unblocked. May what you release return to you multiplied, like sand, like stars, like the generations that will one day carry what you build. You were not meant to grip wealth tightly. You were meant to let it move through you, grow through you, and bless the world through you. Now you know how. Shalom.